I'm Daniel Hester, owner of American Precision Engineering, and we manufacture things for all sorts of advanced manufacturing companies around the world. So we all know if we've ever fabricated something that can get really expensive. So in my experience, there's a handful of things that can help us save money and help you still get a quality product. So here's 10 things that I've found that can help you guys save money. I would suggest that every engineer who doesn't already know this, go out and calculate the strength of 1 inch of a 1/4 inch fillet weld to see how much strength that can actually hold. Because we get drawings that would put, 16 inches of weld all the way around a plate that is holding something with a 1/4 inch bolt. It's just a tapped hole with a 1/4 inch bolt. There's so many parts that we make that have orders of magnitude more welding than is needed for the structure that it's holding, or even just practical. So really invest the time to understand how strong a weld is. If you don't know and it's not a structurally critical thing, just ask. Sometimes we'll see notes. It's very helpful to say at the fabricator's discretion, things like that. So that we're not being directed to put 16 inches of weld on a plate that holds a 1/4 inch bolt. The second thing is when we price things, it's going to be what we call by piece and by pound. The pound part is pretty straightforward, meaning how much weight of material do we need to buy to execute this job? And that might be not what goes into the part, it means what we have to buy. So if you have this tiny little part out of some very special metal, we might have to buy this giant heavy piece just to cut your one little piece out of. And the piece portion means how many piece marks are there? So meaning how many individual part numbers, and how many of each part number do we need to have? Reduction in part numbers is massively helpful in reducing costs because every part number requires that we process that all the way through. So that might be programming the laser, programming the press brake, programming CNC machines, something to keep track of on the bill of material and manage all the way through the job. So reduction in part numbers will really drive down your cost in a surprisingly impactful way. Along those lines, if you can reduce the number of material types. So it's not uncommon for us to see a sheet metal job where we have 10 gauge, 11 gauge, 12 gauge, 14 gauge. You could probably easily just say, hey, we're gonna make this all 12 gauge and be fine. Every one of those materials means that's something we gotta load onto the laser. We're gonna end up with some remnant or drop material, and just that inefficient material yield out of each one of those sheets is gonna add cost to your job. So reduce the number of material types is another impactful way to save money. Engineers create drawings. They like to snap off every single dimension of every inside radius and this, that, and the other dimension that is absolutely meaningless to the manufacture of it or even the inspection of it. Some of these are just dimensions that might need to convey something to someone that's reviewing the design, but it has nothing to do with what we need. And if we're having to, hunt around to try to find the dimensions we need to form your piece of sheet metal, it just clutters the drawing. Now, sometimes we're gonna see drawings that have all these different dimensions, but the 2 or 3 that we actually need to produce the part, so we end up having to recreate the drawing. So what can be impactful to save money is reduce the number of things you show on a drawing, but make sure you're always including what's needed for manufacturing. So depending on the part, that's going to be different, but just don't flood it, but make sure you get the bare minimums on there. As it relates to drawings, another one that we see a lot is somebody was probably told by their boss, make sure to put tolerances on everything. So we'll see this get flooded with a bunch of dimensional tolerances and GD&T all over the drawing, and it's constraining these features incredibly tight. I mean, we've seen things where there are 2,000 tolerance for the equivalent of like a door wedge or something. There's no reason to constrain these dimensions this tight other than someone told you to put tolerances on the drawing. So before you put tolerances on a drawing, think about what it actually needs to be before you overly constrain it, because sometimes that might mean the difference between laser cutting a hole in a matter of seconds versus programming and setting up to machine a hole, which could turn into minutes or hours and obviously add a lot of cost to the job. You'll see this at all levels of industry, but typically coming from younger engineers, they're kind of faking it. They don't quite know what they're putting on the drawing. We see this a lot. They just kind of make these irrelevant notes. Oftentimes those are adding a level of complexity that's not anywhere what's needed. You don't need to fake it. There's nothing wrong with calling and saying, we get it all the time. Like, hey, I'm not sure what we're supposed to put on this drawing. What should we put? I would rather that customer just call. We'll have a quick 5-minute conversation and explain what we would need to see and clarify that, instead of it coming to us as a drawing that's formalized some nonsense. We see uncertainty or complexity on a drawing, that's going to add to the cost. With sheet metal parts, it's not uncommon to see somebody design this with a single part with a 1/4-inch radius here and a 1/2-inch radius here and a 3/8 radius over here. Sometimes there's a reason for that because of the actual functionality of the part. Sometimes it's that they thought it would look cooler, or they didn't even maybe recognize that they had done that. But it's not uncommon to see multiple radiuses on the same sheet metal part for no reason. And that means that we're going to have multiple setups to run those parts. If you don't need multiple radiuses on the same part, don't do them. If you're trying to get a good price, do not blind copy me on the email. I know at that point you have put this out to everybody and their brother, and you're kind of lazily shopping for that low cost. There's some places that are going to bite on that. We're typically not going to bite on something because we don't know if you're sending this to 50 different shops, and we're very relationship based. If you want to save money, call us. We can talk through it, but don't send a blind copy email and expect us to chase everybody down to the bottom. Everybody needs their parts right away, but days cost dollars. So if you want to shorten that schedule, that might mean we're working overtime, we're expediting material to get here, we're paying for expedite for outside service for painting or something like that. So if you don't need it in a certain condensed schedule, don't say that you need it, because you will be charged, maybe not an actual expedite line item, but we're going to have to charge more just because we know we're going to have to bring that material in overnight. We're going to have to pay expedite fees for our outside services. Be cautious before you request something to be done as soon as possible, because it will come at a cost. So one last important thing to keep in mind is that if cost is really driving your decision making, it will most likely come at the cost of removing some features that you're looking for. So you might want to only pay this. Well, that's all that you're going to be able to get out of that product. So that might mean the elimination of certain aspects of the finishing. It might mean removal of some features that are being machined. It might be relaxing some tolerances. There will be some cost of removing of features if you're going to want a reduction in cost, and that's just the reality of what it is. So sometimes you got to consider, is it really worth paying this cheap price, or is it worth paying a little bit more to get a part that functions the way it's supposed to? So there's 10 things that hopefully can help you save money. That's all I got.